Like when the Fed printed a bunch of money during COVID and gave it to like BlackRock to manage, like, was that incompetence? Especially when BlackRock like wrote a plan at the end of 2019 of the monetary policy that the Fed followed exactly when COVID happened, about what the Fed would need to do during a unforeseen crisis. I mean, it's just like, was that incompetence or is that corruption? You know? And so, I mean, a lot of times they try and absolve themselves of like, when they sort of get caught or start to get caught for something corrupt, they'll be like, oh, don't look any further, we're just really stupid, you know? But if you consider just like the massive amount of wealth transfer that's happened in the past 20 years to like the people at the very top, obviously, well, I think it's obvious, but I mean, that can't all have been because of incompetence, you know? And more has come out like with COVID too, like, you know, the safe and effective stuff about the vaccines. And I mean, a lot of people in alternative media knew it was experimental and that there wasn't enough testing and stuff, and they were censored. And then the stuff was forced on people through mandates and things like that. Like, was that incompetence? You know, I mean, they knew then what a lot of people in alternative media knew then, they being, you know, the people in charge, and they still put it through anyway. And now there's like, they're acting like it didn't happen, you know?
Today we have Whitney Webb discussing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and why things are not as they seem. The recent approval of BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF was only the beginning. As more financial institutions and governments invest into spot ETFs, Whitney points out the underlying plan to use Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a means to control the supply. She discusses why very soon cryptocurrency will be used as a way to destroy the value and privacy that's eluded governments until now. She says we're witnessing the collapse of the fiat money system and why this is unlike anything we've seen in history. While the dollar may be the last one to fall, there's something much bigger going on behind the scenes. Let's get right into the video with Whitney Webb as she gives her prediction for what's coming in the days and weeks ahead.
There's been a push for several years, but now it's gaining an insane amount of momentum in steam. But it really goes back several years. And the goal is to have a regulated internet, which means the end of online privacy and anonymity. And they want to do this by having people link a government-issued ID to their internet access and internet activity.
Who is they?
So in the U.S., it's come from the government, but it's not. A lot of government policy, whether it's about this or something else, doesn't come organically from the government. It comes from think tanks. It comes from, you know, groups like that, or even the WEF, the World Economic Forum, that are then given to politicians, and politicians legislate and enact it, and then the state enforces it. But it's not necessarily the ideas of the legislature and the state itself, these policies. And more often than not, these think tanks are funded by corporations and billionaires and all of these guys. And they also own the politicians. So it's really them creating the policy. And they use the state as an enforcer to force it on the public, right? So that's, I guess, the global public-private partnership is what my colleague Ian Davis calls they, right? And I think it's pretty fair. He puts the BIS at the top, by the way, of the pyramid. This policy, one of the earliest iterations of it, at least in the United States, was during the Obama administration. They called it a driver's license for the internet. The idea of, in order to access the internet, when you set up, you know, internet connection at your house, the internet service provider links all of your internet traffic to your ID. And in doing so, the government and the signals intelligence arm or intelligence agency of the government then has access to not just everything you're posting and writing online, but also everything you read and consume online.
And everything you buy.
And everything you buy. Totally. I mean, this whole push is completely related to ending financial anonymity and financial privacy as well. It's a completely interrelated thing. And I've done pretty extensive deep dives on this going back to probably like 2021. Because it's very tied up with how they're likely to force this regulated internet on the populace. Because they're not just going to be like, let's do this now. I mean, people aren't going to go along with it. So they need some sort of event that gets people angry and afraid and panicking in order to stick it through. So basically, this is going to be folded into, I guess, what I would call a Cyber Patriot Act. The Patriot Act being the legislation pushed through in the U.S. after September 11th, 2001. Right. A lot of which wasn't necessarily related to anything to do with 9/11, but was a huge power grab by the state taking advantage opportunistically of the panic after 9/11. So they need some sort of event like that to ram all this stuff through. But the plans have been on the books for a very long time, and it's not just the US, it's really everywhere. I mean, I think in the UK, you have something called like the Online Safety Bill. They'll say, oh, it's about protecting children. But really, it's about ending encryption, which law enforcement in the UK and the US have been trying to do so hard for years and years and years. I mean, Bill Barr, who was Attorney General under Trump in the US, was like, that was his main policy goal, was to end encryption. And he talked about it all the time, but a lot of people didn't really pay attention, I guess. But in the UK, it's a similar push because, of course, as I'm sure you're aware, the UK national security state and the US national security state are very intertwined, specifically signals intelligence, the whole Five Eyes alliance, which is obviously includes more countries, but it's UK and US dominated, obviously. It's not like Australia and New Zealand are running the show there, you know? So in terms of what we're talking about with government, you know, regulation of the internet and all of this, it's coming, right? We're already seeing the first signs of it here. There's an obvious push to censor more speech and link people's speech to their ID and have it more surveillable than ever before. Gutting encryption, why do they want to do that? So they can read everything that you say and all your transactions, follow them all. There's a similar effort in crypto and specifically with Bitcoin to criminalize mixers and criminalize any sort of service that affords you increased financial privacy.
Webb warns against the entry of powerful financial institutions like BlackRock into the Bitcoin space, saying this is definitely a negative development in crypto. She asserts that these institutions are set to control a significant portion of the cryptocurrency supply, and emphasizes the importance of resisting this obvious influence on the market.
Where they want to take this, if anyone uses a mixer, they can go after you. That's what they want to set up. They don't want anyone to have financial privacy or online privacy anymore. And that's what part of this agenda about a regulated internet is. And it directly ties in with stuff like a central bank digital currency, at least what people are concerned about a CBDC for, which is the surveillance capability and the programmability aspect. You know, it's all tied up with this effort to regulate the internet, which isn't really fair to say it's regulating the internet. It's more like taking complete control of the internet, a complete coup of the internet for unprecedented surveillance and control of people's online lives. At the same time that you have these same entities pushing for people to live their lives online as much as possible, as part of the fourth industrial revolution and all of this other stuff. Like we saw in the COVID era, you know, oh, we're locking down. You can't go out and do stuff in the physical world. You have to be online as much as possible. Education's online. Work is online. You know, as much of your life as possible has to be online now because you can't go in person to the bank. You can't go in person to this. You should order your groceries through your phone and all of this stuff, you know? So they're pushing us more and more into the digital realm and at the same time preparing to take more control of the digital realm than they have now by a significant degree. And that's not a coincidence. I'm sorry if you think that's coincidental. That's very naive of you. Obviously, when you're talking about the powers that be, there's competing factions, right? Not all of them agree, but they agree about a lot of the stuff. And a lot of the way these people operate isn't that similar to how rulers operated hundreds of years ago. You know, they want complete and control of money and political power and power more broadly, because then they can do whatever they want for themselves and have a double standard for themselves, but force other people to live a certain way to support their lifestyle, right? And essentially what we're seeing here is an effort to use technology to entrench that in unprecedented ways so that there's no more need to worry about the peasants revolting, right? I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. So As an example, this push for a regulated internet and the end of online anonymity and all of that is directly related to the fact that it's a mathematical inevitability that our debt-based monetary system will collapse at some point, and that the banking system, particularly Wall Street and its global equivalents, have engaged in an unprecedented degree of malfeasance and corruption and insane financial gambling activities. And just like 2008, right? That's going to explode at some point. But in 2008, people knew it was the banks and they were mad at the banks, weren't they? So if you're the banks and you know that's going to happen again, and you're in bed with the intelligence agencies and the government, or in the case of the US, you own the central bank, right? You don't want that to happen again. So how do you find a way to blame somebody else for the financial system imploding? And when you bring the financial system back, what do these people, people like Jamie Dimon and all these top bankers, like, what is their ideal scenario for money and how people interact with and use money? Well, being able to grift as much as you want and take as much as you want from the people under you without them knowing or complaining, because that's what they've been doing for decades, right? Wall Street. So they want to keep doing that. They don't want to change their behavior. So they want to find a way to be able to steal from the underclass as much as possible without the underclass complaining or revolting, and control how they spend their money, and control their financial and other behavior so that they can maintain their place on the top. So what we're having is the engineering of a neo-feudal society where you have the small upper class and then a massive underclass that the upper class can manipulate and control and do whatever they want with as they see fit. And so that's what I think the ambition of a lot of these various initiatives we're seeing for unprecedented control and surveillance are aimed at. And the goal is to use technology, whether it's AI or any of these other emerging technologies, to be able to do that, because obviously there's so much more of us than there are of them. And so in order to scale what they want to scale, to be able to deal with the huge difference in size between their class and our class, they feel like, they need these emerging technologies. They need AI. And that's why I see AI as a largely negative thing, because the people that want to do this are the ones setting it up and programming it and deciding what its objectives are,
Webb foresees a looming economic catastrophe driven by collapsing fiat money systems, rampant inflation, and bank failures. She suggests transitioning to a Bitcoin standard might be on the horizon as the world grapples with the impending crisis. She asserts that the promises made by the Federal Reserve and central banks have been hollow, leading to excessive money printing and a proliferation of poor investments. And with the aftermath of the recent inflation surge, Webb says this will not lead to a return to the status quo. What do you think about her prediction for Bitcoin and where we're headed in the first half of 2024? Comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.